Hello and welcome to the first of a new Real EFL show. 3 matches to watch out for over the course of the weekend. My name is Gary Hutchinson and I am joined today by Real EFL writer and Football League connoisseur Kyle Kennealey. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. A bit gutted about Lincoln last night, but we shall get onto that in a bit in further detail. But no, I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah, we are both Lincoln City fans, so instantly people will be reaching to turn off. But we both have a long history with the EFL, writing for the EFL. I was the creator of the Real EFL. So hopefully we can pick 3 games out that are worth watching and just give a couple of you viewers pointers on who might or might not do well. So we'll go on to our first game and we'll start at the top and move down. So we'll start happy and move closer to misery. And we're going to start with Bristol City and Leeds United. So Bristol City meet Leeds United this weekend at Ashton Gate. Leeds in 2nd place, Bristol City in 9th. So this looks like one of the more tasty fixtures of the Championship, Kyle.
Yeah, definitely. You've got a Bristol City side that kind of for years now have been. You start the season, and a lot of people have high expectations for them, but as of yet, they haven't hit the heights. But you've got a team containing the likes of Max Bird, Jason Knight, both ex-Derby, Scott Twine, kind of like your real flair players, and they are hoping this season will finally be the year that they can make a challenge on the playoff places. And on the other hand, you've got Leeds, fresh off the disappointment of losing the playoff final last season, but they responded really well. On a good run of late, they beat Sheffield United, who were previously unbeaten last Friday. And they just got over the line last night against Watford, in thanks to a couple of goalkeeping errors. But a win's a win in the Championship. And yeah, as we say, 2nd place, joint top. So yeah, they've had a good start to the season.
Yeah, we'll pick up on Leeds first of all. I mean, they're unbeaten in 6. I love XG. Anybody who watches this show over the next few weeks will know I love XG. They're top of the XG table. So they've got the most expected goals. They're joint 2nd, as you say, with Sunderland. But they were expected to be right at the top. When people were talking pre-season about who's going to go up, it was Burnley, Luton and Leeds. They were the 3 teams that everybody was talking about. Now, they got off to a sticky start. And by sticky start, it was a couple of draws. There was pressure on Daniel Farke. They were expected to go straight out of the blocks, and that hasn't happened. But they're unbeaten in 6 now. 4 of those are wins. They've got goals from all over the park. It's not like they're coming from one position. It's 6 or 7 different players sharing the goals around themselves. I mean, it's a difficult trip to Ashton Gate, but you've almost got to be backing Leeds as the favourites for this game, even though they're away.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, some of them players. I mean, you've got Willie Nonto, Ethan Ampadu, Junior Firpo. They're proper players at this level, and you're kind of thinking they are close to building for next season. And you've got Brendan Harrison as well. They're a really, really good side. And yeah, you do say at the start of the season, a couple of draws, but there's always pressure at Leeds, particularly when last year they didn't go up. There was always that second season. Can you go and get promoted? You don't want to be stuck in the lurch of the Championship where teams can spend years when you go down and you don't go up at the first time of asking. You've got teams like Stoke, who end up in the Championship for quite a long time. As you say, Bristol City, I think, have been in the Championship for it's their 10th season now. So you've got a lot of sides that can get stuck in there. But from the start Leeds have made, you're looking and going, I think they've got what it takes to go up the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they're certainly going to be around the top 2 all season. So that makes the size of the task facing Bristol City quite big. Now, at the beginning of the season, it wasn't a great start for them either. Liam Manning seemed to be under a little bit of pressure there. First off, they're now unbeaten in 6. Granted, there are 4 draws there, but that's still particularly strong in the Championship. Now, they're unbeaten at home in the league, which further makes the task harder for Leeds. But there's a couple of really interesting stats because the XG table, here we go again, they're 4th in that. So they're really creating chances. But bizarrely, they are in the bottom 5 for touches in the box. So when they are creating, they're creating really good chances, but they're not getting into the area quite as much. They're 9th in the table. It just feels that if something can click for them, there could be some real progression there. And as you say, they're one of the stalwarts of the Championship. You look at them and you look at Preston North End, they never, ever seem to be in League One, and they never seem to be in the Championship. They're always in that kind of middle bit of the, never seem to be in the Premier League. They're in that middle bit of the Championship. Whatever the outcome on Saturday, do you feel that there's a promotion, a playoff push in Bristol City?
I do, to be honest. As I said earlier, when you've got them sort of players, your likes of your Max Bird, Jason Knight, as I said earlier, they've got real strong foundations as well at the back. And you look at their recent results, as we said, with draws against Cardiff, Sheffield Wednesday, Swansea, making sure that if you don't win, you at least don't lose, just to build on results. They took a point in midweek against Stoke, came from 2 down to draw. So again, when you're not at your best, when you've gone behind to try and get something, is really important. And yeah, when you kind of look at, they've gradually progressed over the last few years, 17th, 14th, 11th. Before that, they'd gone the other way. So yeah, you're kind of hoping this year that this will be the year that they finally make a proper push on the top 6.
Yeah, it's a big city, Bristol, as well. And although like kind of city size doesn't really have anything to do with it, it is quite an intense football city, particularly when the two teams are in the same division, which is very rarely at the minute, given that Bristol Rovers aren't particularly good. And I hesitate to say it feels like a city that deserves a stab in the Premier League, but neither Bristol City nor Bristol Rovers have ever been in the Premier League. I think it's the biggest city in the country not to have had Premier League football. I know the biggest city never to have had top flight football is Plymouth Argyle, Plymouth. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. One thing you touched on there that I just want to talk about as well, you mentioned that they drew with Cardiff. Now we're going to stray a tiny little bit now, but 6 weeks ago, a draw with Cardiff looks like a bad result. But Omar Reza there has done an absolutely phenomenal job. And actually a draw with Cardiff City now isn't such a bad result at all, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, the weekend beating Plymouth 5-0, a Plymouth side that it's difficult to judge Plymouth at the moment. They're a bit of hit and miss at times, but yeah, they've picked up form now a little bit, and you're kind of hoping they set the foundations now to really move themselves away from danger, because yeah, the start to the season was far from ideal.
Gig Reeser's in with a shout at the job full time.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got to be. You occasionally have where this situation kind of arises when you've got a interim manager who comes in. You always talk about new manager bounce, etc. But the results speak for themselves at the moment, so why not?
Fair play. And so finally, Leeds Bristol City, or Bristol City Leeds rather. What's your prediction?
I'm going to go Bristol City 1, Leeds 2.
And I will go Bristol City 1, Leeds 1. So we move on now. You were talking about an interim manager. Last season, Lincoln City had an interim manager, Mark Kennedy leaving, Tom Shaw coming in, and there was a real new manager bounce there. They've now got, peek behind the curtain, Michael Skubala in charge. Coming to a game against Stockport County on Saturday, which coming off 2 defeats. The first time Lincoln have met Stockport County in the Football League since the 2010-11 season. And at the end of that season, both teams were relegated to the National League. This season, both teams will harbour secret ambitions of being promoted to the Championship. It's 9th versus 10th. Now we have to take our rose-tinted spectacles off here, Kyle, I'm afraid, and look at this. Fairly. It's a really interesting tie, isn't it, for two teams desperately wanting to stay clinging on to that top 6.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I quite like Stockport as a club, to be honest. I went to their playoff final game a couple of years ago and they lost to Carlisle at Wembley, and they're a good side. You look at their team; they've just got quality all over. They are particularly stacked in midfield when you've got the likes of Lewis Bay, Oliver Norwood. I mean, his name speaks for itself. Louis Barry, who scored 7 times this season, scored last night in the draw against Northampton, which will be slightly disappointed. They've drawn a few games recently, and although they're unbeaten on the road, they've only won twice. There's 4 draws in there. So they are a tough outfit away from home. And then you contrast that with Lincoln at home, who aren't the greatest, tend to be better away, but coming off the back of a damaging defeat last night at Crawley, and a really unexpected one. A lot of people have sat there and looked last night and gone, Crawley side winless in 10, Lincoln unbeaten on the road since New Year's Day. It's an away banker, but this is League One. This is what happens in League One. So yeah, it's a really interesting matchup.
Yeah, it does look like contrasting when you turn to the XG. I told you I was obsessed with it. Stockport are actually top in the division, so they're actually creating more chances than anybody else in the division, and that's not surprising really when you mention the players that they've got. I mean, Louis Barry, if I remember correctly, was he the boy that was at Barcelona or something like that? I mean, phenomenal young talent who probably struggled a little bit. I think he went did he go to Ipswich? I might be correct in that, or he went somewhere in the League One and really struggled. Lincoln are bottom 2 for XG. So in terms of creating chances, the club literally, I nearly said we again, the club literally create fewer chances than 22 other teams in the division, including Burton Albion, bear in mind, who have just sacked their manager. However, when it comes to XG against, Lincoln are top 3 and Stockport are top 4. So in terms of conceding the least amount of XG. So it looks really like it's going to be which team can breach the opposition's defence. I know every game's like that, but when you've got two tight defences like Lincoln and Stockport, it's going to take a real moment to get through. My fear is that the data points to Stockport being better equipped to do that to us than we are to do it to them.
Yeah, and you do worry a little bit about Lincoln in the last couple of games. As we say, Lincoln last season tended to be very good defensively, but they have struggled in the past couple of games in terms of conceding more time. You look at Birmingham on Saturday and everyone goes on about how much possession, they've plenty of the ball, but they didn't exactly create massive amounts. But them chances that they create, they put away because they've just got the players to do it. Crawley, on the other hand, I wouldn't say that. Typically, they don't typically have the players that you would expect to put the ball in the back of the net, but last night they did it. So as I say, on that hand, you do fear a little bit for Lincoln, but looking at Stockport, as we said, very, very good defensively, better going forward as well. It does kind of point towards an away win, as much as I don't want to say it. But yeah, we're in for a good game, I think, at the weekend.
Yeah, so we'll touch very slightly. I mean, Stockport, to be fair, have only won 1 in their last 6. So then, whilst they're creating XG, they're not being particularly clinical. And XG is it's an opinion based on a stat in reality, isn't it? Because you don't get any XG if the ball's whipped across the 6-yard box and 3 strikers are within an inch of getting it and don't get it. But in actual fact, an inch further forward and it's a goal, so it should be relatively high. So XG is kind of circumstantial. Now, Lincoln are 10th. It's the lowest position that they've been in this season since the league table started taking on any real form, which I think is a real testament given the fact that they are bottom in terms of 2 of XG. So obviously Lincoln are doing something right. Now, they prefer not to have possession. The 2 games that they've had more possession than the opposition in the league this season are Barnsley and Crawley, and lost both of those, 2 of the 3 defeats that they've encountered. So coming for a side like Stockport, who like to have the ball, who like to play it around, who have got players who want to express themselves, does that actually slightly deflect away from the stats point into an away win and suggest that it is the sort of game where Lincoln are a little bit more comfortable?
Yeah, I was going to touch on that possession stat. As you say, Birmingham the other game at the weekend, but you always expect Birmingham to have the ball. So yeah, in some ways it does point to Stockport having a lot of the ball, and Lincoln, you know how high Lincoln press, they try and win the ball back up high, create chances, that sort of way. And you did see signs of that in the first half last night against Crawley, but it just didn't come to what you usually expect in terms of winning it and actually creating chances as much. Yeah, so you look at Stockport, they've got an interesting run after this as well. I think they've 6 home games in a row across all competitions. So, as we said, they do tend to be better away from home, unbeaten with them 4 draws in there. But this is kind of the last chance for a month to pick up points away from home. So you are expecting a good performance on the road. And as you say, lots of the ball, chances for them players that we know are full of quality to express themselves.
So we have to do a prediction after each of these games. It's going to pain me. I'm always going to let you go first, because at least then if you pick Lincoln not to win, I don't look like the only pessimist. So what's the prediction, Kyle?
I'm going to go Lincoln 1, Stockport 1.
And I am also going to go Lincoln 1, Stockport 1. I'm getting splinters from sitting on the fence. That's 2 draws from 3. Now, before we move on to our final game, where I can guarantee you I won't be picking 1-1, we ought to pick up on another major bit of news from League One. And if something happens in the week on this show, we will be picking up on that. And today, Mark Robinson has been sacked as manager of Burton Albion. Now, Burton Albion tried to reinvent themselves this summer. The talk from behind the scenes was that they just wanted to clear the decks. So a whole load of players went out. It resulted in players like Tom Hamer being able to move to Lincoln City for nothing, despite being an established League One player, purely because Mark Robinson wanted to implement his own footprint. They used to be quite direct, quite a brutal, quite a tough team to play. They now have tried to play it on the deck. They've tried to create chances the so-called right way. They've tried to have quite a bit of possession. It hasn't worked. The bottom of the table, and that's saying a lot in a division that also has Shrewsbury and Cambridge, who have been utterly woeful up until the last couple of weeks. So Mark Robinson's paid for that form with his job, and it now means Burton are looking for a new manager. But it's a real crossroads for them now, I think, because they've tried to change the style, they've tried to reinvent themselves. It hasn't worked. Kyle, I know I'm springing this on you a little bit, but where on earth do Burton Albion go from here?
It's really, really difficult because, as you say, when you go and completely change your style, you've kind of got to then bring in a manager that will fit that, because you can't just go every transfer window and completely overhaul a squad. It's just not feasible at this level, and particularly in January, you can't do that. I'm not surprised with the sacking, but I'm surprised with how they started, because the opening day against Lincoln, I thought they were a good outfit. They caused Lincoln plenty of problems, and probably Lincoln sneaked a win late on in the game, probably deserved a draw at the very least. So I'm quite surprised with how they've started. But as I say, you are at a real crossroads now, edging towards the end of October, and you are on the lookout for a manager, and you've got to have someone that's going to work with these players, none of which are their own, and they've got a couple of months until the January transfer window. And as I say, you can't just completely change a squad in one window. It doesn't work like that. So it is a real, real tough job. And yeah, when you do look at the bottom, you have got teams like, as you've said, your Shrewsbury, your Cambridge, Crawley also in there as well, who haven't done particularly well, particularly Shrewsbury. I know Cambridge won last night. So there are teams that you'd expect them to potentially leapfrog if they can start picking up results, but it's still a really tough job to go into at the moment.
Yeah, it is, because they either stick with the wanting to play football philosophy that hasn't worked and retain some of the squad, or if they want to go back to what they knew, then they bring in a manager, the likes of Nigel Clough or Dino Marmira or something like that. I know they've been there before, but the ones that kind of purvey that tough football. And then they have to overhaul the squad. Do you know who I think would be perfect for the job there? And he won't go, but he could soon be out of work himself. That's got Steve Evans written all over it, because he could play the little poor little Burton and all that sort of thing. He would play to the strengths that they were used to, and he would keep them in the division. And he may well be out of work very soon as well.
I wouldn't be surprised if he is, to be honest. They had a very interesting post-match interview last night after their loss at Leyton Orient. So yeah, that the whole experiment again at Rotherham of signing players on a free transfer when everyone sat there. And it was kind of a false position because it was so early on in the window, but everyone was going, wow, you've got real quality players, but it just hasn't worked so far. And yeah, he's probably only got a couple of games to save his job at the moment. So that is one to watch.
It is. So he called out Cameron Humphreys last night for his role in missing a shot and then not marking his man for a goal. And another manager who is quite handy at calling out players when he needs a go-to is Mark Kennedy. And that brings us to our third game of the show, and that is Swindon Town versus Gillingham. Now, we have picked this one because it's two teams who are in quite dire form, and both of whom probably expected to be doing better than they are. You've got Swindon in 22nd, Gillingham in 11th, but Gillingham have lost 5 in a row. Swindon have got 1 win in 7 in the league. So they're two teams that are really plummeting. Now, it should have draw written all over it. But the situation at Swindon is turning toxic. Social media backlash towards the manager is building every day. His interviews are getting more and more bizarre. Yesterday, he was speaking about Navy SEAL strikers. On Saturday, he was speaking about daughters that he didn't have, wanting to bring certain players home with them. Gillingham, they are really struggling. As I say, they've lost 5 in a row. They've only scored twice in that time as well. So it's just 2 goals in 5 games. And they were really pace setters. It does look like a case of which of these teams is going to lose the game rather than which of these teams is going to win it, I think. But what's your initial take on the game?
Yeah, I would have to point towards a Gillingham win. I know, obviously, we're looking at 2 teams that are in real poor form, and Gillingham themselves have lost 5 in a row. And you look at the sides they've lost to, 3 of the teams are in the playoffs. You've got an Accrington team that are struggling as well, but Swindon are just in such dire straits that you've got a point for an away win. I mean, even their only win in that spell you spoke about was Cheltenham when they were 3-0 up and then almost threw the game away. Probably the game that has saved Mark Kennedy's job at the moment. They did have a 4-0 win against Bristol Rovers in the EFL Trophy again, which is the EFL Trophy. Is in a team like that isn't your priority. In a spell like that isn't your priority when you're so low in the table. But I just think Gillingham will have the quality at the end of the day to win the game.
Yeah, I mean, pressure is really building on Mark Kennedy, I think, at Swindon Town. And it's unusual because, in fairness, while he was at Lincoln, finished 11th in League One, were very robust, very hard to beat, not particularly attractive going forward. But that hasn't really manifested itself at Swindon. But it was always a very tough job to take. Swindon in the bottom end of League Two for a couple of seasons now. Traditionally, a Championship stroke League One side, so expectation, I think, is quite big. How long do you think he's got in reality?
I mean, again, like I said with Steve, I think you're looking at a couple of games, to be honest. And you see, as you said about the social media backlash, his interviews are just really, really odd at the moment, sort of deflecting away from the issues really that are at hand. And yeah, he has quite literally got a couple of games to save his job. And this is a game on paper that you have to target. I know, as you said, Gillingham were top going into October, and then they have just completely fallen from grace. And there's no real signs of that. I think they beat Notts County in their opening 8 games. A team were up there. They had some good results. Won 6, drew 1, lost 1. But yeah, from a Swindon perspective, this has to be a game you target and go out and win.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for Gillingham, it's a brief blip. I quite like Mark Bonner. I think he did a really good job at Cambridge. I think over a period of time, he will be able to do better with Gillingham. They haven't had the easiest of runs. Bradford, decent sized. Grimsby, sadly, doing really well, becoming a really tough team. But then David Artell is implementing there what he implemented at Crewe. He was always going to be a really good pick. And at Crewe, I seem to remember it got a little bit tougher before it moved forward. As for Swindon, I genuinely think that it's, I think they're on the final countdown. As Lincoln City fans will remember, Mark Kennedy's interviews got more bizarre, and they got angrier, and they got a little bit kind of rambling towards the end of his spell there. And that's kind of what we're seeing here at Swindon. The problem with Swindon is, where do they go? Who do they get? I don't think that the problem particularly is the head coach. I don't think they've got a good one, but I don't think that that's the sole problem at the club. I think it runs much, much deeper. If I was a Swindon fan, I would be deeply worried, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, 100% agree. As we say, Mark Kennedy probably isn't the answer to Swindon at the moment, but who else is? It is such a tough job to take, and you cannot blame most managers or people, or head coaches out of work at the moment for looking at that job and going, I'm not going near it, because it's just such a club that only looks like they're only going in one direction at the moment. So it's a real struggle.
It is indeed. Right, so that brings us to the end of the 3 games to watch this week. We hope you've enjoyed our insight, even if it is a little bit rose-tinted towards Lincoln City. Next time out, we promise not to include a Lincoln City game. If you do like this video, please remember to like on YouTube, subscribe, and do all that sort of stuff. And we will be back with you again. But from myself and Kyle, thank you very much, and goodbye.